Hello everyone, this is Montecristo from Cloud9. If you don't know who I am, I've been working in esports for 15 years now, and I've worked not only with a Riot game for many years, League of Legends, but I've also worked in a hero shooter with the Overwatch League, and now I'm working on a tactical shooter for CSGO with Flashpoint. So in this video, we're going to talk about how Riot's history of balancing League of Legends may give us some clues into how they might balance Valorant, and indeed, how they can avoid, I think, some of the pitfalls that they ran into with League of Legends, specifically when it comes to a very important topic for esports, which is the ability to carry as an individual versus having a game be focused entirely around team play. Now, why is this important? Well, in any game, any sport, you're going to want to build up star players. So it's incredibly important that esports have a certain level of individual agency where we can clearly see that a star player is better than the average professional gamer. If it skews too hard into overall team play, it becomes very difficult for individual players to stand out rather than team tactics and strategy. Now, on the other side, you don't want a single player to become so dominant that they can't be shut down with good tactics or good teamwork on the other team that is specifically targeted in order to limit that player's potential ability to carry the game. Now, obviously, this is a very difficult balance to strike. On one side, we saw more or less a failure in terms of games like Heroes of the Storm, where it was very difficult for an individual player to carry because of shared resources within that game and no real ability to purchase items or create any kind of individual snowball. On the other hand, we do have things like what we're about to talk about in League of Legends, where at one point in time, individual carry potential may have been too much. Now, we didn't really see the capacity for individual carrying at the professional level in League of Legends until the arrival of a player that many of you have probably heard of named Faker. Now, this happened when I was casting in Korea, so I was casting the League and casting Faker's first matches and seasons back in 2013. And I've dug up an old game as an example. So as you can see, this is a game from 2013 when Faker from SK Telecom T1 was playing against a team called MVP Blue. Now, many of these MVP Blue players would go on in 2014 to be among the best in the world at their positions. So we're not talking about a game where he's absolutely dumpstering scrubs or really running away with any kind of significant advantage in terms of skill. But what you're going to see here is that while he's playing LeBlanc, which is a League of Legends champion that is effectively a mage assassin, he's able to start one-shotting the support player on the Zyra and really just carrying away with this snowball to the degree that the enemy team just surrenders at 20 minutes, which is the earliest time in League of Legends that it was possible to cast a surrender vote at that time. It was almost unheard of in professional games for a player to be able to surrender or a team to want to surrender in a professional game at 20 minutes, so it was rarely seen. So this was an anomaly, and it really goes to show how hard Faker was able to carry in an era when no one else could really reach his individual skill level, and it really brought up a lot of problems within League of Legends. Now, currently, I do think that League of Legends has gone too far the other direction in terms of rebalancing and focusing on team play to the degree that we don't see the star level of carry performances that we used to. So I'd love to see a little bit more individual agency. But let's talk about why we have these balance decisions being made by Riot and how they were affected in League of Legends. And then we'll take a look at Valorant's core mechanics and talk about how I actually think it's going to be a lot easier to quickly rebalance for sort of a preference for team-based skill versus individual skill in the game. And I think they've created some really cool mechanics to do that. So in the game we're watching from 2013, you'll notice that there's an item called Deathfire Grasp. This was an item that would allow even more upfront burst damage. So in terms of 100 to 0ing an enemy champion, you're able to really push the limit on that and continue to snowball by getting more kills, therefore more gold, more power, etc. But a lot of the changes really came in because at a base level, Riot realized that one of the problems with the game, not necessarily in the professional scene, but when it came to the average player, was that it was not great for many players to play the support or jungle positions. These roles didn't have a lot of gold. If you would get behind, it would result in situations where you really had no power to affect the outcome of the game. So they started to think about how they could effectively change those positions to be more impactful. Now, obviously, when you're raising up the power level of these positions, you're diminishing the relative power that a mid laner who has the most advantageous position to make plays on the map has, like Faker, and also the ability to carry. So some of these things that they did was they created some support itemization changes that would make supports have better survivability. One of the major changes that they made was in vision. Now, when you're trying to snowball a lead as a team that's ahead, in 2013, you had to pay for vision, which means that if you didn't have gold to buy wards, you just had less information than the other team, and that allowed the team to make more informed plays and potentially even all-ins that would kill you because they had more money. So a lot of the vision changes for Riot were to move away from purchasing vision. And then giving it to you in the form of free vision and trinkets, and to the point today where you can only have one purchased ward, one pink ward down on the map at a time. Also, this prevented supports and junglers from spending all their money on this vision instead of items that would give them higher survivability or greater impact on the game. So the vision changes, and not only making it free, but sort of relieving that burden from support and jungle players to provide the majority of vision, was a huge factor in how powerful those positions were. Probably the biggest single difference, though, was in passive gold income. So back in the day, the overall income that was just gained automatically for every player within the game was significantly less. And this was increased over time. And what this does is that before, your main way of getting gold was by getting kills, assists, or farming with CS. Now, supports and junglers were pretty far behind when it came to farm and kills compared to mid laners, top laners, and AD carries. And so the proportion of gold was really going majority to those positions. Now, when you increase the passive gold income, you sort of set a baseline, and if there's more overall gold in the game, while the values of kills and farm remains relatively the same, then the difference between the carry positions and the support positions and the jungle positions is going to be lesser overall and allow them to have more items and therefore increased survivability. So these are all the things Riot did in order to encourage more team play and sort of diminish the potential of a player in a typical carry position like mid lane, their ability to sort of run away with the game and 1v9, as it were. Now, you may be wondering, well, what does this have to do with Valorant? Well, the problem with what League of Legends was doing is that you can't increase the power level of support and jungle players necessarily without diminishing the potential carry capacity, right? Because you're basically you're trying to struggle to put positions that have different income levels and different purposes in line with each other. So you necessarily kind of have to take power away. It's not quite a zero-sum game, but you don't have the absolute flexibility. Now, if we switch gears to tac shooters, one of the great things about tac shooters in general, like you may have noticed with Counter-Strike, is that there's a shared economy. So right now you can instantly alleviate the problem because you can't share gold in League of Legends. Indeed, a lot of League of Legends' problems might actually be overcome if you could reallocate gold or buy items for other players, which you cannot do in the game. However, in Valorant and in CSGO, you're able to take a lead that one player has and transfer that lead to another player by buying them guns or giving them money within a round. So this is really important because it allows teams to make a conscious decision about the distribution of their resources, which means in turn that if one of your players is indeed a star player, you can redistribute resources into that player to try and get them to carry harder. So first off, the nature of the game is going to make this a much easier system to balance because it'll be the players allocating a shared pool of resources rather than having discrete individual incomes. The other thing that I think is the most brilliant part is that Riot has built into Valorant basically these two complementary systems that should allow them to pretty easily balance the way that team play versus individual play works. And it comes in the form of the agent abilities. when we talk about their usual, their typical, their normal abilities, now these are all bought with money within the game. So as we've seen, many players have most of these abilities in every round. So you're going to see them very commonly within the game, but that's tied to the actual economy. Whereas the ultimate abilities, fascinatingly, so the most powerful abilities that the agents have within Valorant are tied to getting kills and also to picking up orbs on the map. So therefore, players who are given the orb priority, and the players who are actually dealing the most damage and getting the most frags in the server are going to have their ultimate abilities up more often. Now, this is what we might call a skill multiplier, where that the stronger a player is at shooting and getting frags and the better they are, the more ultimates they're going to generate, which allows them to be even more dominant on the map. Now, the other side of that coin is that as the player becomes more dominant, you're going to accrue loss bonuses for your opponent. So every time you lose a round, you're going to get an increased supply of income as a rubber band mechanic. And then the players on the other team are going to have more money to buy normal abilities. So really what we're coming down to here is, how does it affect the game to have the price of abilities as they are right now? Because on a team play side, there's so much utility in these abilities. So much, there's a lot of movement abilities, wall hacks, smokes, etc. So the concern is these abilities, if they are too cheap and you get them too often, a team of players is going to be able to use all that utility. If you know a player, the star player on the other team is, for example, going to be consistently defending the A site. He's their A site anchor, as we would say in CSGO. You might dump all your utility on that position in order to shut that player down, to make sure that they're not going to get more ultimates, that they're not going to get more frags. Whereas the individual player, they're going to have to outplay those use of utility, basically. So the thing is that when you create balance here, you can directly affect it if you're Riot. If you're trying to limit the ability for teams to shut down individual players, all you have to do is decrease utility usage, right? Which will improve the, it will increase the amount of gunplay within the game compared to abilities, right? So you have a very easy way by increasing utility cost or decreasing the amount of utility any given player can have at max at any point in time, in order to control how much you want to prioritize team play. On the other side, if you really want to just improve a single player's ability to carry, what you're going to do is you're going to change the number of kills that it might require to generate an ultimate. You could lower it if you want more ultimates within the game to allow a player to carry more heavily. You could also increase potentially the number of orbs on the map or the number of ult charges that an orb will give. So because you have these two mechanics, these two balance levers that are pretty opposed to each other and that you can operate independently or in tandem, I think Riot's going to have a really much better time of balancing the game of Valorant around their goal of how much team play they want to be a factor within the game versus how much individual carry potential. Of course, we can't know where the sweet spot is for Riot when it comes to this level of balance, but it does give me hope that we're not going to have this really radical seesaw like we had in League of Legends between insane hard carry ability from one player into, I think, an over preference on teamwork styles that I think we have just slightly right now. I think the game is generally in a very good place and that they found a pretty good balance. I would like to see a little bit more individual carry ability, but I recognize that given the nature of the game, for the reasons we've discussed, it is very difficult to achieve that or to even like slightly move it, so it can be dangerous. Whereas in Valorant, I think that the game design itself has set itself up to be successful when it comes to these kind of balance concerns and balance questions. This gives me a lot of hope for Valorant as an esports title if it's balanced properly, because it is something that can be easily adjusted. I still think utility's probably just a little bit too cheap here. I think in the end, what Valorant's probably going to do is increase the cost, so you can't go out with full or almost full abilities every single round that you play, which is what it looks like is pretty commonplace right now. So I think a slight increase to that to make it a little bit more meaningful, whether you're going to buy guns or whether you're going to buy utility, and a team's ability to just kind of shut an individual star player down with the overwhelming amount of utility that's in this game will be important. But we're going to wait and see. Obviously, it took 4 years for Faker to emerge and really show the potential of League of Legends after the game was released in 2009, and likely it will be years before we even see a truly extraordinary player emerge in Valorant. If you like more of this content, please subscribe here to the Cloud9 channel. I'll be making some more Valorant content and my thoughts as a veteran esports commentator in the coming weeks.